Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me. Today we are doing something a little bit different, and it should be a little bit of fun. What I'm going to do, I'm going to change my view so you can see more of what I am doing. And if my face seems to get in the way, I will just hide my camera for a little bit. So today, what are we going to cover? We are going to be doing building your first Laravel application. And what I want to do is kind of go back to basics a little bit and go look back at building your first. Ooh, echoey. That is strange. Let me go check my settings and make sure everything is set up correctly. Audio is looking good. There shouldn't be too much echo. It could be the music. Let me pause that. Let me know if it is causing an issue. I think I had the same issue last time where it happened occasionally for a couple of people. So, Laravel. We are going back to basics. We're going to go look at building our first Laravel application. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the installation options. We're going to look at setting it up, running it, adding routes, blade views, controllers. We're really going to go back to basics on this one as well. So this should be quite interesting. So what we're going to build is a personal website. I was thinking earlier today about what would be a good use for basic Laravel. If I didn't know Laravel and I was coming to learn Laravel, what would be useful for me to perhaps look at to build to help me learn? And a personal website really gives you a lot of options. Yes, it is stream time. Thank you, wife. My biggest supporter. So the Laravel website is fantastic, and it really shows you how simple it is to get started with Laravel. There's lots of different starter kits that you can use, including Vue, React, Livewire, or just plain old PHP, or an API. It's got a lot of things built in. You can move really fast. You can do a lot of things really quickly. And the documentation is probably one of the best tech docs I've ever seen. It's available in light and dark mode for those that like dark mode. I am a light mode person. I find it works better on my eyes. So, installation. There's a couple of different ways that you can do this. If you don't want to install the global composer package for the installer where you can just Laravel new, then you can use Composer Create Project, Laravel/Laravel, which will use the skeleton application. Or there's even the build service that you can use. And what this will do is, on a Mac, if you curl to laravel.build / the directory name you want to use and pipe that into bash, what that will do is build a new Laravel application with Docker setup in the directory specified. It's not a bad way to do it, but it's up to you. I personally use the Laravel installer. It is super reliable. I've got it installed. All I've got to do is Laravel, and it's there. So what I like to do is we'll go Laravel. My face is probably in the way here, so bear with me. There we go. Just look down here. We can go Laravel new. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a personal site. And what do we want to do with this? I personally like to initialize a Git repository straight away so that I can version control from the beginning and I can start to track changes just in case I do anything slightly wrong. You can specify a branch. You can use a development version. Use Jetstream if you want to. And what I like to do is you can use Pest to install Pest PHP from the beginning, which is something that I like to do. You can also do things like inertia if you want to, but I'm not going to be covering inertia on this stream. This is just Blade. So I'm just going to go new, Laravel new, personal site, Git and pest as the options. And what that will do, that will run through the install very quickly. I'm not going to use Docker for this because I want to keep it really lightweight. And I don't want people to feel they've got to install Docker to get Laravel working if they're not quite ready. So we have got Laravel installed. I can now come over to my IDE, start a new project, and we're going to use the personal site. Wait for that to spin up. That is all there. That is all there. Dependencies are currently being indexed. And what I like to do as soon as I get in here is I like to come over to Composer. I like to force this onto 8.2, which is my version of PHP that I've got running locally. So if I do a quick PHP -v, you can see that I am on PHP 8.2.2. So now I can do a quick Composer update to update the dependency list. Nothing's going to change, but it will register that. I can then do a quick Composer bump, because what you'll notice is Guzzle is not the latest version, neither is Framework. So same with Faker. So what I can just do is do a quick Composer bump, which will update those dependencies in here to the latest versions. And then I can do a Composer update again, which will get me where I need to be. So out of the box, what do we get with Laravel? If I just do a quick, I won't use my aliases today. If I just do a PHP artisan serve, this will spin up a local PHP server, and it will allow me to come over to here, and I've got my Laravel site good to go. This is a default Laravel welcome page, and you can work with it from here. So now that we've got it installed and we know how we can get it running, we kind of want to look at building things out. So let me close down that Composer file because it's no longer needed. Now, I'm probably going to want some JavaScript because I'm probably going to use something like Tailwind. So if you come over to the Tailwind website, you can come to Get Started, Framework Guides, Laravel. You can run the NPM script. We can get this ready while that does its NPM magic. And the beauty of this is that you can use Tailwind, you can style things really nicely. And let me just put my camera back on for a bit. And it really allows you to build a nice looking site. So let me just say always add, initiate that. I'll copy this, come down to my Tailwind configuration, drop that in there. Now I'm not using JS or Vue, so I can remove those. I want to come over and add my styles. So in resources CSS, you have an apps CSS file, which is used. You can add your own styles in here. You don't have to use Tailwind. And then if I just copy this, I'm going to need this soon. So for now, I'm just going to run npm run dev. Let me hide my face so you can see this. npm run dev. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see this nicer. npm run dev. That will do all of the magic that it needs to do. I'm going to call this one npm. And this one I'm just going to call artisan. And here I can just run PHP artisan serve again. Come back to my server, and that's here. And we're good to go. This has now got everything I want in it. So the default directory for Laravel, once you install your project, it can feel perhaps a little bit overwhelming. You know, app, bootstrap, config, database, node modules, public resources, root storage, tests. It's it can be quite overwhelming. I'm just going to turn my heater off because my office is getting very hot. So anything to do with your application typically lives in app. You've got a console component, exception handling, anything to do with HTTP, all of your database models and service providers, which we will probably get into a little bit later. For now, we're going to focus mostly on routes and resources. So within resources, these are things like your style sheets, your JavaScript scripts, any Blade views that you want to use, because Blade is a template engine for Laravel. It comes with your default Blade view called Welcome, which works. This is loading in Tailwind inline, which we can now get rid of. We're going to use Vite, which is a JavaScript build tool, which allows us to load this in. And what we can do is we're going to add that into an array. And then we're also going to include our application's JavaScript here. So now if we come back to here, this should be good. And it means that we're now using Vite. We've got our fonts all coming in nicely. And all of this content here. We just have a quick look at this. We can probably drop that as an example. And there we go. Sponsor bits disappeared, and this is now aligned over this side. So that's not going to be our personal site, right? It's not going to look like this. We want to think about structuring this out. Now with Laravel, you can use things like layouts, or you can use components. I'm a big fan of using Blade components personally. So I can just go components, create a directory within views called components. And I'm just going to create a new file called layout.blade.php. Bearing in mind that this is a personal website, it's going to be a lot simpler. So I can grab, if I just grab all of this, come over to the layout and drop it in, make sure everything is looking good. This bit I can use the curly brace syntax to go config app.name and then give it a default in case you haven't configured it. So then within here, what I can then do is I can load this component using X dash. You can't see me. You won't see this yet. So in Laravel, what you can do is you can create components, and anything within components, you can prefix with an X dash and then the name of a file, in this case, layout. So here is our layout. And if we come back to here, you can see that this has not changed. However, if I come back and if I just remove all of the content from this page, grab all of this HTML that nobody really wants to see, I can use slot to load this in. So this is, if you've used Vue or anything like that, then a slot is just where you've got a component and you want to be able to pass content into it instead of using properties and stuff. So that should now load. And you see up here, you can't see me. It's really small, but you should maybe see it if I add a class to it of, I don't know, text to Excel. Let me just shrink that. Here we go. You should be able to see this. I move it here. Here we go. You can't see me. There it is. So that's our home page currently. And this is all of our, this is our main layout for the application. So what we want to do is we want to think about routing. And the way that routing works in Laravel is if I close this down, is over here you've got routes, you've got API routes which you can use. You've got channel routes. This is WebSocket broadcasting in case you want to broadcast anything. Console routes, so you can see that we've registered an artisan command called inspire here. So if I just go PHP artisan inspire, this will just give me a quote, and that is this being registered here. What we can also do is our web routes. What you can see is when you go to the first /, we're going to return a view called welcome, which correlates to views welcome. So what we can do is, if I can delete that because that's not needed, I always add strict types because I'm just me. And this view is, we can actually replace this completely and just say, actually, we just want to load for this route the welcome, and we're going to call this home. And this is a little helper that you can use where you're just returning a view. Let it go, here it is. And as you can see, it's still loading. You can do a GET request, you can do POST requests, but we'll get around to those in a little while. Now, what I like to do in terms of organization, inside my views, I like to create directories. So if I'm building like a bigger application that's maybe got a back end and a front end, then I like to split things out specifically. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a directory here called pages. And I'm going to create a new file called home.blade.php. And then within here, we're just going to copy the content of welcome into here. And we can now delete this welcome file. This will cause an issue because we haven't fixed the root yet. But if we come back to our root here, we can say pages.home. And then that has loaded again. So what is strict types for? So strict types is just ensuring that you're not going to get any kind of conflicting types when you're writing PHP code. You know, you're trying to add a string to an int or trying to add, you know, those sort of kind of things that can trip you up and can potentially cause errors. That's all that is. So if we look at our root here, let's zoom in. What we can see is we've got one page currently, and if we want to build out a personal website like we said we did, we're going to want multiple pages. So we can copy this and we can duplicate it, and we can say, okay, so if you go to the about page, I want you to go to about, and we're going to give this a name of about. We'll get to the name part in a little while, so I can explain the what and the why. And let's say maybe we have got a blog as well. And so we can say pages, blog, and the name for that is just going to be blog for now. Part of this will change, and that's fine. That's normal. Refactoring things, it is part of daily life when you're a developer. So far, we've only got this one page. And if we go back to here, that's fine. But if we try and go to perhaps /about, pages about not found. So we know that we need to create these views, right? So inside pages, we can say, okay, create about.blade.php. What we'll do is we're just going to copy this content, and we're just going to say about page. That should now load. The about page is there. Perfect. Come back to here. Okay. And then we're going to go for blog.blade.php. Copy that in there. And we're just going to replace that with blog page. Nice and simple. That is all loaded. So then if we go to /blog, we are then on the blog page. But we're going to stick with the home root for now. I just can't do dark mode. It just messes with my eyes. Like, no, I've manually set everything to light mode. It just works for me. So, what do we want to do when we're building a website? We want to most likely have some components. Here's a home page. This is going to want to be a specific way. However, this layout will need amending. We'll need to have a look at this layout and see what we can do with this. Let me go see if I am logged in on Tailwind UI. Let me just quickly see if I can remember the password. I don't think I do. Still no. Still no. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll drag a Chrome window over so that we can use Tailwind UI, because I know I've got that remembered. So here's Chrome, and we're just going to go to Tailwind UI. Come over to components, and we're just going to start grabbing stuff. Let's just come down to like a landing page example. Let's just pick a random one. Which one sounds good? Actually, is there a template that I can nick? That'll just work. Personal website. No. Let's just grab one of these landing pages. We'll grab, I don't know, deploy your confident of this one. This one sounds good. It's got the bits we want on it. And what we can do is we've come to here quickly. Yeah, that's all good. We can just copy that. Come over to, I don't need the terminal open anymore, so I can close that. That'll make things quicker. And within here, let's just remove slot for now and just drop all of that content in. So when we come over to here, as you can see, we've now got a website. This one does require JavaScript, so part of this design won't work, but that's not what we're doing. So what we can do, we've got these pages here. We've got some content, got this part, and then this footer. That footer wants to be persistent. The navigation wants to be persistent, and everything in between wants to be dynamic per page. That is the way I'm going to look at this. So if I look at this footer, scroll up until I get to the top of the footer. And there we go. Here's the footer. We want that. Here's the main content. All of this is something that we will replace. So for now, I'm just going to zoom all the way up to the top. And here's the header. We want that. And then all of this. Let's just collapse all of these. And what we'll do is we'll just delete all that content within there. And we will just pop our slot within there. There you go. You can't see me. Don't know why it's all the way up there. Let's just make sure that's there. Let's just quickly inspect things, make sure, yeah, that works okay. That's got enough clearance, I'd say. There we go. So there's our main, there's our header, there's that. So then if we go to about, there's the about page. And if we go to the blog, there is the blog page. So let's come back to the home page and we can start playing around again. Next, what we want to do, because we've got the header and we've got the footer, this kind of layout is probably fine at this point. So what we're going to want to do is start thinking about how we're going to load this content. Well, there's quite a few different ways you can do this. So if I just came back to here and just kind of grabbed this main hero section, for example, let's say I want this on the home page of my website. If I come to pages and home, I can delete that and I can just drop it in. That's not a problem. And it's here. It looks fine. I've got a picture, I've got those, I've got a title here, but it's not that useful because what's happening here is all of this content is static, which is fine for the most part. But do I want all of that? I'm going to delete these buttons because I don't need the buttons. So let's go back, have a look at it, all looking good. And this, let's say this is going to be a hello and welcome to my site. And then this part underneath would be something like a little information about you. So you'd have that, and that's fine. But maybe you've got your name in there. Maybe you've got, hey, I'm Steve. And you got some more content in there. Dynamic content is a lot more interesting when you're working with Laravel. So that, let's say that is our hero there. That's the main part. I'm not going to go too much into depth with components and the design of it and that sort of stuff, because I think it might be a little bit boring and a lot of you probably already know that part of PHP. So we can add our content within here and it starts to push out into our layout, and that's all good. Next, let's say we want to, what could we do? What could we do? What did we say we'd do on the, we are going to routing, controllers, views, view components. So let's say we want to move this to a controller, for example. So maybe routes, you can come down here, and this is fine. We're just directly loading a view here. However, controllers are perhaps a little bit more useful. So we can use PHP Artisan. We can use a make command to make a controller. And we can then just say, within pages, we want to make a home controller. We can make a pages controller. Personally, I like to make invocable controllers. And I like to include a test every time, a pest test every time I create a new page or anytime I make a controller. So it reminds me to go back and add that test. So what we're doing here is, if I zoom back out, is PHP Artisan using the Artisan console. We're going to make a controller. We're going to make it within the pages directory within app HTTP controllers, and then we're going to make a home controller. This will be an invocable controller, and we want to generate a pest test at the same time. So as you can see, we've got our controller. So what we can do, we can swap this to a GET request, and then we can swap this to the home controller. Simplify that. That's hanging for some reason. So if we come over to app, HTTP controllers, pages, here's our home controller. As you can see, we've got an invocable controller. Add my strict types. I don't need to extend anything because I don't really need to. So I can make this final class. I don't need any doc blocks. And then for here, I can just return the view. Pages.home. And this is going to return a view. So the view helper, we can just call the directory structure using the dot notation. And then this should load exactly the same as it did before. And there we go. We've now got a controller running. We can pass things through here. We can say something like message and say testing message. Then on the home, let's say that we swap this part for the message. Need the dollar. It is PHP after all. Testing message. So that in our controller, we can then control the content from here. So I could say I do stuff with PHP and APIs, and reload, and there we go. We're looking good. So our controller works. It is routing things. So what I typically do at this point is, okay, I want to look at testing. So this test is pointless. So is this one, although I will add a keep file to make sure that that stays within version control. I will grab that because I'm going to want that content shortly. What we can do is in here, home controller test here. I like to use it, not test. So it can load the home page. This doesn't return. Import the function, the URI. Say we're going to use the home controller. And we're going to assert a specific status code. So for this, I am going to composer require. I've got a package that I use for this. That makes things a little bit easier for myself. You don't have to do it, but feel free to. So we could say that the status is HTTP. Okay. Let's get the value. This is just a PHP 8 enum. So you can make sure that it works okay. And what we can do now is PHP artisan test. It can load the home page. Fantastic. It loads the correct view. So again, we're going to pretty much just do the same thing here. You always want to make sure that you're getting the right status code. And then we can say assert view is, and the view you're trying to get is pages.home. So now we can run our tests again. It loads the correct view. We're looking good. But if we try to load the about page, you see that we do actually get a fail. This is the home page we care about right now. And then we can say it passes the message to be displayed. What I find is a lot of tutorials that go back to basics with, I suppose, Laravel, is that they don't include testing. They kind of skip over it, for example. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are getting the message into the home page. And at the minute, the home controller, we could just copy that and that would be fine. So assert C text, and the value of the text we want to see is I do stuff with APIs. And now we're good. That is a tested home page at this point. So we know that it's passing the data through correctly. We know it's using the correct view, and we know that it is loading the right page. So to me, that is a well-tested view. It's loading that, it's passing this through, and we're getting a 200 response. All is good in the world. So what's next? What can we look at next? Let's say we can use something like, we want to create a blog. Let's say we want to create a blog now. So we want to be able to write blog posts, save them in a database, and then they want to be loaded onto the page. So we need to think about models, right? Now I'm going to ignore these migrations. We'll get back to those. So Laravel's got something called Eloquent, which is an ORM. What's that?
Logan's tooth.
Logan's tooth came out.
It wasn't even waffly.
Fantastic. My son's tooth came out. So Laravel's got something called Eloquent, and it's an ORM, which is a object relational mapper. And what it does, it maps objects to what's in your database. And it's a way to it's abstracting away from SQL into an object-oriented way to interact with your database. So what we can do is we can create a model. And a model is a representation of a table in Laravel. So I'm just going to create like a post. I'm going to add a -m because I want a migration. And I'm going to add an F because I want to generate a factory at the same time. Now that'll create these three things for me. We've got a post model, which is called an app models post. We've got a post factory, database factories post factory. And then we've got the migration itself. And the migration is a bit that you send off to your database. This is how you're defining the structure of your table at this point. And it's important to remember that if you ever want to amend your table, that you don't go back to this migration, because that your application would have moved forward and you can't go back and rerun everything because it's not going to do any sort of diffing in between. Oh, I haven't loaded this bit yet. Here you go. What you want to do is, with the purpose of a database migration, is that it's going to keep a log of the change of your database. So you want to alter a table, you want to add a column, you create a new migration to alter that table, to add that column. You don't want to go back and edit this migration here. I'll probably show you that shortly. So what I want to do here is come down to my posts migration here, and quickly add my strict types, drop the doc block. This can be a static function and it doesn't return anything. So we've got an ID and we've got timestamps. So this will be an unsigned big integer in SQL, and then timestamps, this will create your created at and updated at columns. So what does a blog post need? So you use a table, blueprint table, and you can say, okay, so I want a varchar for a title, but a varchar is just a string, right? So I can say string, and I can give it a name, and I'm going to say, okay, so this is my post title. I can give it a specific length that I don't want it to exceed. Why did I convert it into a static function? Because it's not going to need any kind of object context. So if I delete that, if I hover over this closure can be declared as static, which creates better scoping, and in some cases can improve performance. So I can just add that. So I've got a title. Fantastic. I can display the title. I can get the table, and I want a text column. So I could go for a medium text, but most blog posts aren't really going to exceed a standard text column. So I can just call this content. What this would do, it will create a standard text column for you in SQL, and that will be all added there. I don't really need an author. I don't need anything like that. This is going to be a really simple blog, by the way. It's just going to have like title and content. It's not going to have too much in it. It's going to be super simple because I don't want to. This isn't a stream about this is how you build a blog in Laravel. This is a stream about how to build something with Laravel. So I'm going to keep it super simple. We're not even going to use slugs or pretty URLs or anything. We're going to reach straight through to the ID. We can use title and content, and that is all. So what is a factory? So these factories here, let me just clean it up so we can focus a little bit. Let me assign the model. These factories are, when you're writing your tests, you can use these factories to generate fake posts to use within your tests. So if I was to go to the blog index page, for example, I want to look at all the blog posts, I'd use this post factory to generate a certain amount of posts stored in the database for the running of my test, so that I can ensure that I can actually see them. Can I see blog posts? If there's no blog posts, what do I see? I can start to test that sort of behavior. And what we've got is we've got a title. So this would be using the PHP Faker library, and I can just use a sentence. I just want to have a sentence for that, nice and simple. And then for the content, I can use Faker again, but this time I'm going to use a paragraph. It's going to be that simple and that clean. So over on my model itself, which is stored in app models post, I can declare my strict types, I can make it final because I'm never extending it. And it's got a trait already added to it called has factory. And what that's used for is to say that, okay, Laravel, when you say, post factory, this will load this for you. It does the routing behind you. Now with Laravel, with your models, there's many different ways that you can kind of save data. You can say, okay, I don't want to worry about mass assignment, so I'm just going to mark everything as, I'm going to say guarded is nothing. What I like to do personally, I like to use fillable fields. I like to say that the title and content is both fillable. These are two properties on a post that I want to be able to fill in. And if you try and pass anything else, it's going to complain and say, no, you can't use that. And that is what I like. I see this as my line of defense before the database throws an exception at this point. Now, yes, you will use request validation, but this is that next step after request validation. Yes, I'm going to validate requests coming in and make sure that they are giving me the correct data so that I can create a post. But if I use a CLI and I want to create a blog post through the CLI, yes, I can do some clever validation in there, but if someone else joins the project, maybe they'll forget. But this is the way I like to do it. So I've got a post factory, I've got a post, and I've got that. So what I want to do is inside database, I'm just going to say, I'm going to create a database.sqlite. So this is going to be a SQLite database that I'm going to use for this application. Here's our configuration. So what I can do is I can come down here and I can find SQLite. I can say, okay, so I want to say my database is, I can assign my database. So in my env, which is my environment file, I can just swap this to SQLite and drop the rest, basically. So this env file, this is your application's environment. This is you saying that this is my site name. This is my current environment. The app key is something slightly different, which probably won't get time to go through today. We want to allow debugging. Here's my URL. Here's my log. And for me, right now, I'm going to use a SQLite connection. And here's lots of other stuff. So because I'm using SQLite, what I can now do down here is I can say PHP artisan migrate. And it's going to create the users table. It's going to create the passwords table, failed jobs, access token, and posts. It's going to migrate everything for me into that SQLite file that I just created. That probably won't open now. I can come over to here, database, new data source, and I can say SQLite personal site file, and I'm going to select where's personal site database. There we go. Open, update that. So this is me just using PHP Storm to allow me to quickly connect things and grab things. Apply, okay, here's my personal site. Reload, here's my tables. And as you can see, here's my posts table. It's great. So now I can use something like artisan's tinker command. So I can say PHP artisan tinker. And I can say, okay, so I want to use my app models post factory. And I want 20 new posts. So now if I come back to my database over here, you can see I've got 20 posts. It's using a sentence for a title and a paragraph for the content. It is good. I can do what I need to do now. So let's come back to our resources, views, pages. Here's our home page here. So let's just collapse that for now. This bit, we're probably going to want to have this within a section. And then we're going to want to display our stuff. So if I come back to here, I can come over to like blog sections. I'm just going to grab this one and I'm going to say, okay, cool. Here's my blog. And what I want to do is just display some blog posts. So if I just collapse everything, all the HTML within here, what you'll see is here's from the blog. Here's text, which will just show under it. And then here would be the list of blog posts here from the blog. So here's my hero, there's my navigation, and here's the part in the middle. So what we want to do is we want to loop over our content, our posts. But to do that, we actually need to pass them through from the controller. So if I just add this, I can now query it. So I'm passing another variable down into the view at this point. So I can just use the post model, start a query, and just get them all. At the minute, I've got 20. So if I come back to here, I can just do for each loop. Posts as post. I can end that for each loop, and I'm just going to drop that content back in there. So now, as you can see, I've got a lot of posts. For the home page, that's probably a little bit too much though. So I think maybe 6 would be enough. So we could limit this here. Okay, for each post, just give me 6 of them. However, what we can do is we can use the query builder here, and we can just say, okay, I know SQL, I know I can limit a query, and I know I'm going to want to say, okay, I only want 6, but I want them to be ordered by whatever was created the latest. And so this is what's called a query scope. And these query scopes will take in the model, and it will say, okay, so get created that column, and then just append the query to say, okay, so order by created at ascending, descending, whichever one it will be. Okay, SQL limit, now get all of them. And now I only have 6. That's a lot easier to look at. So that's doing that part. This is showing me this, but what happens if I deleted my database? Okay, so PHP artisan migrate fresh. And what this command will do is it will drop all the tables in your database, including all the content, and rebuild the tables with no content. So now if I come back, I don't have any blog posts, which kind of makes my site look a little bit crap. I think you'll probably agree. So what I can do is, let me grab an empty state. Empty states. I don't know. I'm just going to copy this one because it looks kind of cool. So on this for each here, this is just a for each. Yes, I could, maybe I could, maybe do a if count hosts, then do the for each, else do that. That's ugly. I hate doing it that way. It just doesn't make sense. So instead, this for each, I'm going to use a for else. And what a for else would do, there we go, for else, post as post, end that for else. This for else and for else. What you can then do is add in an empty tag. So if this is empty, then display this other bit of content. So let me copy that again and drop that in there. I'm going to collapse it for the stream because the content of it isn't really important, to be honest. So come back to here. Okay, so, oh, look, from the blog, I haven't got anything. Here's a little thing in the middle, and oh, look, okay. But if I come back and I go back to Artisan Tinker, I can go create those 20 blog posts again, and then it disappears, and that's there again. So we're able to show the content that we want to do. And what we can then do is on this article here, because we are passing this post variable through to it, we can come down, we can swap the title to be post title. That is the property on the object. And then this is the content. Currently, it's only a simple paragraph. However, if you were to do this with multiple paragraphs, then maybe you'd do it slightly differently. Post content. So now if I come back you can see that my content is now there. You can do CSS word limiting. You can do other things on here just to kind of display it slightly differently. That's currently not going anywhere. So let's have a quick look at routing again. So this whole thing here has got an A ref up there. There's another A here. Image, not interested in any of that stuff right now. So we've got two links. We can either click on the title, or we can click on the time date thing up top. And how do we route to this blog post? So what we need to do, we need to come back to our routes directory, come to web. And what we want to do is create a route. So we can do, okay, we're going to do a get request. This is going to be to blog / post. Going to give it a name, blog show. Now I haven't got a controller set up yet, so let's get that set up now. So PHP artisan, make a controller again, pages, blog, do controller, invocable, and I'll create a test. So now I can add that in. Show controller. Let's just simplify that. And we can go have a look at this. So loading this, do this cleanup again. You don't have to use final classes, by the way, that's just me. So we're pulling in the requests at this point. So we can actually have a look at the request. So if we come back here quickly, we'll add the routing. So href, where do we want to route to? There's a route view helper, and you can say blog show, I believe it was called. Yep, blog show, and you can just pass through the post ID. So this little helper, what that will do, it will generate the URL so that when you click on it, you go to the right place. And you can replace that one with it too. So if I hover over this, click it, we are now going to blog number 16. And this is giving us the full request. We don't actually need the request, but I always like to keep it in there. But what we also need to do, we need to add the post model because we're actually going to be loading this in. Now, with Laravel, we don't actually have to query this. So this is post number 16, as you can see in the URL at the top, just. And as you can see, ID number 16 here. Got all the content that we need, and it's all good. So this is using something called route model binding. And what that does is it's a piece of middleware in Laravel, which will, if you type hint, or sorry, if you add the post here, what you can do, like if I just put string, then this probably isn't going to work. It's not going to load the post. It's not going to find a post. But if we say post, it does. And I can be super specific, and I can say that I want the ID of the post. You know, if I did title, then you know that's not going to work because it's not going to find a title called 16. But if I had an ID, it is going to find it. And all it does is it kind of preloads the model that you are querying into your controller for you. So now I can return a view. And this is going to be pages, blog, show, and I'm going to pass down post. Now, if I come to views, blog, and we're just going to add a quick new view file, blade.php. You're going to copy this, add this in here, grab some content quickly, maybe content, grab something like this. This one, copy, drop that in there, roll all the way to the top, and here's what I'm assuming is the title. No, this one is. This is going to say blog post. So as before, we can access the variable that we passed through, and we can access the properties. And then everything within here can just be deleted. And we're just going to get the post intent. That's fine. That's fine. That will load everything. This will load all that. So if I refresh, I now have the blog post. Go back home, click on this one, remember that title name there, and now it is there. So we got some database loading, we got dynamic content, dynamic routing. What else could we potentially go through? I've just hit the hour mark, and we've covered routing, controllers, Blade, and the database. I think that's probably enough for now, because if you're new to Laravel, this is probably going to completely overload you. You know, we've got different types of routes going on here. Some are just loading a view, some are loading a controller, some are using route model binding. And this again, sorry, let me add that return type, me and my OCD. We're passing through data. And then we looked at tests. And then the blog. We can write one last quick test, perhaps. So it returns a not found exception if the post does not exist. So let's finish on a test, because testing is important. We can say, okay, so I want to do a GET request. URI that I want to go to is going to be, I'm going to use the action helper. So I can go directly to the controller. You can pass a string here. You can pass something like, you know, blog 1234, or you could use, like we did in our view, you can use root blog show, and then pass an argument to it. However, I like to go straight to the controller. It works for me. Don't feel you have to do it that way though. So this is going to expect an argument, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to assert status code quickly. Let me load in HTTP, not found. Now, you would assume that this would pass, but it's failing because it's missing the required parameter here. So we can pass through a parameter and say 1234. And now we are passing our test because it is not loading. Then what we can do is say that it loads the page when there is a post. So void. So now we can use our factories, use a post model, grab that factory, and we're going to create one. So now we've got a post to play with. We can do the exact same test, but we want to assert that the request is going to be okay. This is failing because we're getting a 404. So if we swap this 1234 for the post ID, run our test again, now we are passing. Wrong one, sorry. Now we are passing. And again, we can test to make sure that the view is correct. It loads the correct view. So if we grab all of that, we can then obviously duplicate, and we can say assert view is, and the value of the view is going to be pages.blog.show. Make sure that we're testing. We are good. It passes the blog post down to the view. So we're going to do the same thing here. And we can say assert C text. And the text that we expect to see is the post title. And there we go. We know that that post title is now being displayed, and all is well in the world. We are seeing exactly what we expect to see, and we're good. One other thing we can do is say assert view has. And what this will do is it will assert that it has certain variables passed to it. So currently, all I'm doing is saying, okay, I expect to have passed post. Let's make sure that, let's see if we have a variable called cheese. And that will fail because that variable does not exist on here. But if we added it, cheese 3, and our tests, it is now passing. So we can test that we are passing the correct variables, we're loading the correct view, content is being seen. And yeah, that is probably as far as I would go with it for today. We've looked at loading things into the database in the background. We've talked about models. Models are super, super handy for Laravel. This is a representation of the database, basically. We've got a title, we've got content. We've got a factory that we can access so that while we're using our tests, we can get random content to work with. We've passed it up so that we know how our database is going to look. And okay, so let's say we're going to add one more thing before I finish. We're going to say PHP artisan. We're going to make a migration this time. And this is where we don't want to make a model. We want to add we're going to amend this table. And we're just going to say alter posts, add published. And we're going to say that the table is posts. So what we do, we give it the name, and then we give it the table. And this table will be loaded into the migration. Let me reload this from disk because it's not seeing it. There it is. And what you'll see is, here we go. So I can make this a static function with a void return, drop that out. And it's got a down method as well, which I can explain in a second. Void. So what we can say here is that what we want is table after content we want to add a table. We want to add a Boolean called published. I'm going to set the default to false, and we want this to be after the content. So what we should see is, if we look at our database, we've got ID, title, content, created at, and updated at currently. So now if we PHP artisan migrate, and we come back to our posts, if we refresh this, published, sort of way down there now. Why isn't that working? I don't know why that's not working, to be honest. I don't know whether it's a SQLite thing. Let's migrate fresh, come back to here. Yeah, it might be a SQLite thing because it works in other databases, but you can say when you want it afterwards. And what you can do is you can add a down method. So you can say you want to remove published when you say artisan down. And what I'll do is I'll close all the other tabs. You can see that we've got published here. So now if I PHP artisan migrate rollback, rolling back all the migrations. Basically what rollback will do is it will take back the last migration that it did. Let me just migrate again, get everything back up there. So now we can have published. So we've added a new field to a new column to our database. So what we need to look at doing then is coming back to our factory, and we've got published now. So we can add this here and say this take a Boolean. We want a Boolean value. Come back over to post. We say, okay, so this is actually a fillable field, but we also want to cast. So what's important at this stage is that when you're casting something, you're telling Eloquent that when it comes back, you want it to come back as a Boolean. If you didn't, it would because in the background on the table here, the Boolean, this is just adding a tiny int, basically. It's not actually adding true or false, it's adding a 1 or a 0. So you're casting this to a Boolean so that when it comes back, it's got the value true, for example. So if I just come to PHP artisan tinker again, if I just create some now, published true. But if I come over to here, posts, published 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, not as readable. So you don't have to do any sort of kind of calculating or anything like that. Laravel will do that for you. But the problem now is that we've added an extra bit of complexity, that we've got some posts are published, some posts aren't. So when we're looking at that home page, when we want to load these posts, we want to make sure that we are loading only the published posts. So we can come to our home controller here, and we can add a scope or add a query. We can say where published is true. That should now be published. Come back to the home page. All of these should now be published, and we shouldn't see any unpublished ones. So what we can do to see that, where it says marketing, what we can do is we can just modify that view so we can see it actually working quickly. So views, pages, home, Marketing here. So post published. Now this will show a 1 right now. But what we can do is we can just do a quick ternary operator and just say published. And if it isn't published, then we can just say not published and we're good. Currently it all says published, but if I just remove that, let's go back. We got not published, we got published, published. Add that back in. These are all now all just the published ones. So you're using that query builder to query specific fields and say, okay, I only want these things. I only want, this would be the same as me saying select star from posts where published equals true. Order by created at limit 6. It's the same thing at that point, right? So if I come over to here and just say new query console, and it's probably going to complain about this. Order by, run that. "20 rows received, console." I don't know why it's not showing anything. I don't know, but it's the same thing. So now what we can do is just be happy that things load as we expect them to do. And we are good. That is all I'm going to cover today. I think that is probably plenty to get your head around if you are new to Laravel. If I went through it a little bit fast, I do apologize. I will probably do another Back to Basics Laravel, but this time looking at creating forms and submitting data and validating that data. That will probably be another stream in the future. So make sure you do subscribe to get notified of these. I will probably get this up on GitHub. Stay tuned. I will tweet about it at Just Steve King. Follow me on Twitter. I will tweet about this. Probably not going to get it up there now because I still need to eat my dinner and my wife is probably waiting for me. But we've covered routing, we've covered Blade, loading views, the database, enough stuff to get your head around and really dig into for this. If you like the content, if you've got any feedback, drop it in the comments. I love feedback. These live streams are just something that I enjoy doing. And if you've got any kind of feedback that you'd like to give me, any constructive criticism, anything that you'd like to see me do, drop it in the comments, drop it over to me on Twitter. Make sure to go follow Laravel News on Twitter as well. In the description below, you'll see a link to our newsletter. We send weekly newsletters where you get a rundown of a week's activity, any tutorials, any articles, any news articles. You also get jobs sent directly to your inbox thanks to Larajobs. And you get lots of kind of cool stuff sent to your inbox once a week. You don't get spammed. There's no kind of heavy marketing stuff. It's just content that's on the site directly to you once a week on a Sunday, typically. So thank you for tuning in. That was fun to get back to basics and kind of have a slower paced stream where it's nothing too kind of crazy and advanced where we're tripping over logic. It's nice to get back to just taking it easy with, this is how routing works. This is how this works in Laravel. And if there's parts of Laravel that you're unsure on, let me know. I'm always happy to do a live stream on specific topics if it's going to help even just one person. Chances are it'll help more than one person, but it's always good to have an idea of what would help you. Other than that, I'd like you to have a very nice evening, have a very nice day, morning, whatever time zone you're in. Enjoy. Thank you for tuning in and have fun. Goodbye.